There are many different ways of formulating this training of mind, many different ways of describing the purpose of, say, meditation, mindfulness, the spiritual life, many different ways of providing a teleology, a purpose, an end, a why to the methods that we use as we practice. Many different people answer the question of why do we do this? What's the point of this? In a variety of ways. The way that I formulate it, the way that I describe it, the emphasis that I give is we do this in order to become trustworthy. We do this in order to develop the skills required in order to be trustworthy individuals, trustworthy communities, trustworthy cultures. Perhaps we might even become a trustworthy species. This means that we're trustworthy for ourselves, we're trustworthy for others, we're trustworthy for all beings. Would you mind sitting in a different spot?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, just in a different spot.
I will do so.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was thinking of doing the same thing.
Yeah. Maybe just move that chair away.
Can you maybe sit back here?
Well, no, it's fine if he sits anywhere. Just move that one away. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great. So, we should behave. We should treat ourselves and each other in trustworthy ways. That's the claim that I make. That's what I say is the purpose of this. And like many different similar descriptions, if you take a word like that, like trustworthy, and make it the point of everything, then we need to look at it very closely, understand what's meant by it. The way that I describe it, the way that I define it, it means that we have the intention to be of benefit. We also know what benefit is. We know what true benefit is. And finally, we have the ability, we know how to be of benefit. So I call this love, wisdom, and power. Love is the intention to be of benefit to ourselves and others. But we also know what this benefit is. We know what it is to be of benefit, what real benefit would be. And we also have something called power. We have the ability to get things to be the way we think they should be. We have the ability to have an impact, to effect change. The training that we do is designed to bring these qualities out of us so that as time passes, time is revealed as our friend. Not our enemy, not just the thing that takes away the things that we like eventually, not just the thing that kills us eventually, but time becomes the thing that brings forth these qualities more and more because of the way we're practicing, because of the way we're training. As far as I can tell, when I myself have dug myself deep into this training, when I've watched other people dig down into the training of one's mind, the question, what is it that we trust? What is it that is trustworthy? What is it that we already depend on? This question becomes so powerful that oftentimes it can become debilitating. We can become so deeply confused about what is trustworthy that we don't know how to take action at all. And for most of us, most of the time, we are acting according to, we act according to, which is to say that we trust certain cultural assumptions that have been provided to us since we were young. And perhaps we're succumbing to those, perhaps we are rebelling against those. But either way, we still are behaving in accordance with certain ideas, certain assumptions about what life is really all about. In this way, we've been, you could say, indoctrinated. One of the most common aspects of this, one of the most powerful teachings that we've received, that in all likelihood most people here are living according to, is the sense, just to give you an example, is the sense that the thing you should be doing with your life is getting stuff done. Yes? So this is something that a lot of people believe, that the work that you do is of the utmost importance, that it defines who you are and it defines your value. And a lot of our choices become defined by this premise. So just to give you one example, I was teaching in a seminar at St. Michael's College, and I had the opportunity to go a few times through the semester, through the final semester of this senior seminar. And at the beginning of it, the first thing I did actually before I had the opportunity to have much influence was I asked everyone, what's most important to you? So here you are at the end of your college career, for many of you, the end of your educational career. What is most important to you right now? What's the thing that is central in your life? And the most common answer that was given, I wrote everything on the board, the most common answer was friends. Friendship. I take my friends to be central, to be most important in my life. Okay, so that's good. Sounds admirable, noble, and healthy. And eventually, the semester went on, and the last time I was there, I asked everyone, okay, so soon enough you're going to be leaving college, you're going to graduate, you're going to do something, whatever that is, you're going to do something. What is it? What is this thing? And then most important, why are you doing it? What was the impetus for the decision to do this particular thing? And so they said this and that. They talked about, I'm going to go to New York and work this job. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do that thing. And this is the reason for this, and this is the reason for that. And I pointed out at the end of it, once I'd written down all these various things and their reasons, that the most common value, the most common central point in their lives, just a few months previous, friendship, was not anywhere on the board. The students had not chosen their future according to friendship. Friendship, being with people they trust and care about, that wasn't there. Instead of that, they were working jobs to make money, or perhaps to have a good impact on the world. They wanted to make a difference. Perhaps they just didn't really know what to do, and so they were going to spend some time in their parents' basement. Whatever it was, the motivation was not, I will find a way to spend time with my friends. I will find a way to spend time with the people who I care about. That had been the most common reason in the beginning of the class, but at the end of the class, the most common reason was work. Was I want to either make money or I want to have a good impact on the world. My work is the central defining factor in the major decisions in my life. This, for most of us, is taken for granted. And the reason I bring it up is that this is not normal through human history. The sense that your work is, I'll put it differently. The sense that what you ought to be doing in life is seeking out your calling and doing your sacred work for the benefit of the world, this just isn't normal in human history. It's not a normal thing. So if you look at classical Buddhism, for example, it's good to do good things. Of course you should do good things. But the reason you should do good things is to get out of the world. Because it's not improvable. The world is a mess, it's a disaster. And whatever you do, it will still be a mess and a disaster. And your route to happiness is, at the very least, to get out of the human world into heavens, and ideally to get out of the entire world, including the heavens, and enter nirvana and be done with it. So in that way, a totally different motivation is present. Not to be a worker who achieves things in the world, but on the contrary, to be free from the world, to be free from work. And what is the word for work in Sanskrit? Somebody must know. Dharma is actually an interesting, this is very interesting actually. Dharma, I don't think I can get into that right now. But the word dharma was vastly reinterpreted with a movement spearheaded by a text called the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred song, which it's a relatively recent text, but it was created as a response to a number of other movements, and in it the word dharma was vastly reinterpreted to mean your sacred calling, right? The thing that you should do. In that case, you probably read it, right? No. Okay, so it's an interesting text, which I guess I can't really get into right now. But yeah, dharma could mean something like your preordained purpose. Yes? So it would mean something like, you're white, so you ought to lord over others. That's what the Gita states. No. It does. I know. I know you do. That's why I said it. So, the Gita is, if you read it, part of it is sacred and part of it is, just factually racist. And so you have to sort of deal with that. So dharma has this very complicated meaning in recent centuries. But there's another word that just means work. Karma, exactly. So the word karma just means work in Sanskrit. And is the word karma a positive or a negative term? This is very clear. It's absolutely negative. It's not neutral. Definitely not neutral. It's a negative thing. Your karma is bad. You have to carry on this karma. You can do good karma or bad karma. If it's good karma, then that's good. If it's bad karma, then that's bad. But even good karma isn't as good as no karma. However good the karma is, it's still not as good as no karma. And when you use the word karma, when you talk about doing work, it has this bad connotation that people have to do work. This was true actually for us also. Us means, most of us here from Europe, I suppose. So in the European tradition, this is also true. Menial labor was bad. Labor, ugh. So you hear menial labor, it sounds awful. Who would want to do that? The purpose of life is leisure, spirituality, contemplation, God. So recently we've shifted this to the point where we want to be doing work all the time. The reason I bring this up is it's only one example I know. There are many, many examples that we could bring up about how people have been brainwashed to see the world in certain ways, to see the purpose of life in a certain way, to make decisions according to certain criteria. This is just one that we've been told you're supposed to do a lot of work all the time. Nowadays, people work a lot. How many hours a week do people work now? It's unknown, right? There's no way to know because you're always working. For most people, you're never not at work because you have your phone, and your phone is connected to work, and you're going to check the work email even though you don't want to. Your thoughts about work are the first thing that arise when you wake up, the last thing that pass away when you go to sleep. And there's a kind of a pride, in saying, I'm busy. If you're not busy, then you're lazy, and if you're lazy, then you're bad. But if you're busy, then whatever it is justified, right? I'm so busy, I can't see you. That's okay. It's reasonable. You're busy. You have to do work. I'm so busy, I'm not happy. Well, yeah. Sure. That's reasonable. Can't be happy and be this busy. So there you are. You're going to sacrifice your whole life for what? Well, for work. To work. This, just as one example, is a demonstration of how we have been indoctrinated. We get indoctrinated through the centuries, through the years, until we start to see things according to specific criteria. And we trust those assumptions. We trust those perspectives to the extent that we start to make decisions according to them. We look at things in very specific ways. We forget that there are other ways of looking at things. And so we behave according to patterns, which we gradually discover are untrustworthy. For example, the idea that you are basically a worker who ought to be working all the time. Ideally, you'd be working all the time. Unfortunately, you're not perfect, so you can't work all the time. But if you were perfect, then you'd be working all the time. You would have your perfect calling that would be sacred, and you would know with certainty that you're making the world a better place and there was nothing better that you could be doing with your time. We aspire to this idea, and we aspire, and I know I'm going to find my perfect calling in which I'm perfectly happy. Other people, I'm sure, have such a thing. I don't know anyone like that, but I'm sure that they exist. And then I will someday be like that if I just keep on working and striving to find my calling that will be my truth in action. We have this sense, and we search and we try, and then eventually, perhaps, we realize that this criterion, this strategy, this approach isn't working. Yes? It's not working. Just as one example. We're not happy. We're melancholy. We're lonely. We're anxious. We're depressed. We've been trying this for a long time. I'm going to try to find my sacred calling that I can do all the time and work and be totally fulfilled. And I do that. I do the things in accordance with that. And then I remain unfulfilled. So we say, okay, well, I'll give it another chance. I'll just do this for another year or so, another 3 years, 10 years, 50 years. Still melancholy, lonely, anxious, depressed, unfulfilled. Eventually, there may come a point when we realize that the thing that we have been trusting to make our decisions for us isn't trustworthy. As I say, for most people, this is a terrible experience. This is disorienting, confusing. It feels like you're falling off of a cliff into a chasm of despair. It's awful for most people. And it's so uncomfortable that there's a great incentive to just try that again, to just buy in again for another year or 3 or 5 or 10 or 50. But for the lucky ones, we're willing to doubt. We're willing to question whether the things that we've been making decisions according to are really trustworthy. And when we do that, we typically do enter despair. We enter suffering. And the Buddha said something very important about this moment. He said, at this moment of suffering, this moment of urgency, this moment of hopelessness, there are just two ways forward. There are just two paths forward. You either go in search or you go insane. These are the two possibilities. You go in search, that means you go in search of, as it's put in the text, someone who perhaps could teach me a method or two to overcome this suffering. The other is that you go crazy. You lose your mind and you do crazy things. For example, you try the thing that didn't work. Again, for another year, or 3 or 10 or 50. That's a kind of insanity. You cover over your despair with searching out sensual pleasures. You engage in this vast economy because everyone else seems to be doing it and I'm not sure what else to do, and so we just do it. And we eventually live out the extreme insanity. What's so common nowadays, an insanity that's hard to comprehend because it's so colossal. And that we have simultaneously the sense that all there really is in the universe is matter. For some reason, the way we should make decisions is according to our feelings. And in looking at the world as if it's made of matter, and then making decisions according to our feelings, we as a community behave in such a way that destroys life on the planet. It destroys the world, that eliminates the world. This is extreme insanity. It's a level of insanity, as I say, that is so extreme that it's difficult to comprehend. It's difficult to even acknowledge. And yet most of us are insane in this way. The vast majority of us have already gone insane in this way, and we're participating in an economy and a machine that's destroying the planet. And we can't help but look at the world as if it's made of matter and make decisions according to how we feel, even though we've clearly demonstrated for 10,000 years now that this is not working, that we just continue to accelerate in the direction of the destruction of all life, and yet we can't find another way. Because we have been so deeply indoctrinated, because we're susceptible to that, and because at this point, when we try to look for wisdom, we don't find it. We don't know what to do. Because of this, we go in search. We go in search for someone who can teach us a way or two out of this suffering. It's very difficult to walk this path of search. It's very difficult for us to develop a relationship with someone who we can trust more than the various lessons that our society, and not just our society, but it's actually older than that, our genes, you could say, very ancient patterns, more trustworthy than what that has taught us. This isn't easy. And so I'd suggest that we actually look at the words used very carefully. The emphasis isn't on finding. The emphasis is on searching. And in general, when we talk about searching for a teacher, searching for a guru, in general, in most traditional contexts, the search, the finding of the person, is taken to be at least the first half of one's training. And how is it actually done? How does this happen? How does one do it? How does one go in search? One goes in search by maintaining the very desperation that has led us to go in search. We find a way to be confused. We find a way to question and investigate more and more skillfully. So for most of us, we do have a sense, whatever it is. Maybe it's because our work is unfulfilling, but we still believe, because we've been trained by the mind that produced capitalism, that real fulfillment is in work. That the problem here isn't that work is unfulfilling. It's just that your work is unfulfilling. If you found a different kind of work, then you'd be happy. Work isn't to be questioned. The specific work that you've been doing, maybe you question. Find a different kind of work that would be fulfilling. And then that can be applied to other things, right? Of course, your partner doesn't make you happy. It's just because they're the wrong partner. It's not that partners don't make you happy. Yes? You can't question that. You should have a romantic partner. If you don't have one, then you'll be sad. You need one. You must have one to be fulfilled. You must have a job to be fulfilled. You must. If you don't have these things, you can't be happy. If you have these things and you're not happy, it's just because you have the wrong ones. Just go in search of another one. Okay? So there's that sense. That kind of going in search isn't what's being referred to here, because there's no deep questioning there. There's no fundamental questioning of what the purpose of life is. It's still just, okay, I want the same thing but a little different this time. If the same thing were a little different, then I'd be fine. This go in search means that you don't know how to move forward. You don't know how to answer these questions. You're asking questions that have, as far as you can tell, no answer. You don't even, as one of the residents said recently, you don't even know how to approach the question, much less ask it, much less answer it. You get to that point of confusion and you just search and search and search at a deep level. To the extent that you've learned how to skillfully question in this way, to the extent that you've learned how to doubt, how to deeply investigate, to that extent, meeting with a teacher is meaningful. So it isn't like the teacher, it isn't that someone else can get enlightened or understand something or be skillful in pedagogy or something like that. It isn't that they can just do that on their own side and that does it for you. It isn't that they can do all that and then you meet them and due to their practice you suddenly receive all of those benefits. To the extent that you have searched, that you have questioned, that you've doubted, that you've lived in despair, in hopelessness, in a sense of urgency that absolutely prevents any bypassing of any kind, so that there's no way forward whatsoever, to the extent that you remain there completely confused, to that extent, when you meet someone who has the answer to your question, there will be a significant shift. So it's very important for us to look at this go in search, not simply as, okay, so I'm going to go find something outside of myself that will solve my problems for me. We already did that, you understand, when we took on all of these theories that our society taught us with its insidious motives. We were taught to believe a lot of things. We already tried the solution of just take answers. A lot of the time when we think, I'll go and search for a guru, for a teacher, there's that basic strategy remains in place. I will receive something from the teacher, and then I will be okay. I don't have something that I need, they have it. I'm going to go and get it from them. There's that sense. But when we go in search, the thing that's emphasized, it's so obvious it's a little embarrassing to say, but I have to say it. When you say go in search, the thing that's emphasized is the search. Most people actually don't know that. You hear go in search and you say, oh, go find someone. That's not what was said. It's not there. You can listen again. Ready? Go in search. It's the search that's emphasized. You search, 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 search. That's the part that we typically don't want to do. We want the answer. We want the solution. We don't want to ask the question and ask the question again and ask it again. But it's in doing that, it's in going without the answers that we gain self-confidence. It's in not receiving answers from the society, not receiving answers from anyone, including ourselves, that we gain self-confidence. That self-confidence, to the extent that it's developed, on the one side, that to the extent that it's developed, we become capable of skillfully, productively giving ourselves over to someone else's teachings. If all we do is know what we know and we're certain that I know this and I'm right and my conscience is always correct, if all we have is that, well, then that's okay. We have that at least, so that's good. But that doesn't allow us to grow in the ways that we don't think we should grow. But it's actually the ways that we don't think we should grow that are the most important ways for us to grow. It's easy to grow in the ways you think you should grow. That's the easy part of life. The hard part of life is to grow in the ways you don't think you should grow. That's the hard part. That's the thing that we don't want to do. If you want to grow in a certain way, well, then you just do it. But what about the ways that you have to grow, that you don't think you have to grow, that you don't want to grow? We won't grow in those ways as long as we just stay on our side, referring to our own perspective on things. So you have something, but you don't have enough. If you give yourself over to someone, well, then that's good because, how do I say? I mean, sort of a funny way to put it, but so people a lot of time worry about handing their lives over to some master. Does that make sense? A lot of people are very afraid of this. You have a teacher, a guru, an unquestionable spiritual authority, and people are worried about totally handing their lives over to such a person so that person will completely control all of your decisions. There's a really concern about that, which to me, I have to admit, is a little amusing because you all already did that. It's not worse. What I just described isn't worse than the situation you're currently in. Does that make sense? It's just who is the unquestionable authority? It's yourself. You already handed your life over to somebody who's not very trustworthy. Right? You're already doing what some arbitrary person thinks you should do all the time. Does that make sense? I'm not getting anything from the crowd here. Okay, good. Great. Most of us are incapable of doing what we think is wrong. What we don't want to do. If we feel we should do something and it seems like this is the true thing which I should really do, most of us just have to do that thing. But that's the exact same situation you're in if you're under a teacher, a guru. Then you just do whatever they tell you to do. Right now you do whatever you tell you to do. It's not better or worse. The good news is that this other person, if you hand yourself over to them, at least then you have the experience of two different people having control of your life, so you can tell what the difference is, right? So for a long time you gave your life over to yourself. Now you're giving your life over to someone else. So now you have something to compare, so you can tell the difference. So that's good. But neither of these situations are ideal. So on the one side, you're giving yourself over to yourself, your own conscience, that's good, you have that clarity. On the other side, you're giving your life over to someone else, you have a sense of their conscience, their sense of what's best. Maybe they use you for their own selfish aims, but you're already using you for your own selfish aims, right? So not better or worse, it's just neutral. So both of these are good, but not great. The great one is to deeply question so that you can come to trust yourself at a deeper level than mere beliefs, desires, feelings, hopes, fears. Setting aside all of that, you trust something deeper in yourself than that. To the extent that you've done that, you can hand your life over to someone else in a healthy way. You balance the two. So to the extent that you've gained a deep self-confidence, to that extent you can have confidence in your ability to give yourself over to someone else. It should balance in that way, ideally. If you're too far in the one direction, then you're selfish and narrow-minded. If you're too far in the other direction, then of course lots of bad things can happen. A person can be mean to you. You're not able to assert your centrality in the relationship, which the student should have centrality in the relationship. The student should be the core of the relationship. The teacher is just an accessory to the student. The student is the point. Teacher just is used by the student. If the student has that sense of confidence. So for the student to go in search and then perhaps find a teacher, this is the ideal circumstance, in which case we can gain a sense of trust in the teacher and then eventually use that trust to gain trust in ourselves. The reason I bring all this up is that right now in our society, there is a deep trust crisis. Some people call it a meaning crisis, but a meaning crisis just means that we've lost trust in the attitudes, in the ideas that have run our lives for the past few decades or centuries. For example, materialism or humanism, anthropocentrism. This sense on the one hand that everything's just matter, sense on the other hand that human beings, and in particular their feelings, are at the core of the universe, the most important thing in the universe. Capitalism, you could talk about communism as well, feudalism. There are many different ways of looking at things that we've lost faith in. And because of that, there's a meaning crisis. Nowadays, when I look at the public discourse, I see a lot of people showing why various systems are bad. It seems relatively easy to demonstrate why this system or that system is bad. So, say liberals are criticizing conservatives, conservatives are criticizing liberals, and we've gotten to a point now when, we have to admit that all of that critique is pretty good. It's pretty accurate, actually. None of us believe in. Well, we're getting to the point. We're moving in the direction where none of us believe in anything. We're not holding to any particular way of seeing things, any particular worldview. And this is a kind of crisis. With this comes a distrust of institutions in general. Because of the structure of our society, because we're moving to do work for money, which is something that we don't even believe in, but we do it anyway. We lose track of our friends, and so we distrust the people who are around, not because we necessarily think that they're bad people, but because we haven't developed trusting relationships, because we just move, or we're so busy at work that we don't get to know people. And then finally, we have a sense that I should know what I don't know. I should be who I'm not, at least not yet, being. I should, for example, have found out by now what my calling is, and I should be working on it, but I'm not. I don't know how to live a good life, and all of that comes to the crisis point of the crucial point of a sense of lack of trust in ourselves. And so with that comes a sense of self-shame, self-hatred, a lack of self-confidence. And so we don't have trust in ourselves. We don't have trust in the people we're around. We don't have trust in institutions. We don't have trust in ways of looking at things. And we're left in this crisis state in our civilization right now. The bad news is that it's painful. It's painful to live a life without trust. It's painful to live a life that feels meaningless. The good news is that this is that crucial moment when we can either go insane or go in search. If we're really struggling with this, then we've put ourselves in the empowered position. If we're really struggling, actually struggling, to the extent that we're really struggling, we empower ourselves to judge accurately who has resolved that struggle. To the extent that we have gone in search, we can tell if someone else has gone in search. If we haven't really done that, then we can't really know that. But if we have really struggled, if we've really searched, if we've been really confused, if we've really questioned, then it's easy to tell if someone else has done that. And it's relatively easy to tell. It's somewhat easy to tell. It's easier to tell if they've actually resolved that. Because a lot of people can, through charisma, rhetoric, practice, get good at giving the impression that they have resolved these basic questions. But if we throw ourselves into asking them, then not only do we get to the point when we can see if someone else has asked them truly, we gain the confidence that it is possible to answer them truly. We directly gain that confidence that these questions could be answered. And when we look at it in that way, we stop paying attention to just is a person charismatic or eloquent or something like that, because we have to search for someone who has the real answer to this real question that we've gotten better and better at asking. It's by distrusting that we gain the confidence to develop a truly trustworthy relationship. As we gain that ability, we put ourselves in the empowered position of judging whether someone else has actually asked and then, in fact, actually answered these questions. And if we see that a person has truly asked, and as far as we can tell, has truly answered a question, then we can engage with them, we can examine them, we can look at them closely in order to see whether we have an affinity with them, a personal connection with them, such that they can enable us, they can empower us even further to go into this doubt in order to find true answers, in order to find that which is trustworthy, that which is actually trustworthy, completely trustworthy, not just something that resonates with the things we've been taught by our culture over the years. But instead of that, something that is absolutely true, which is to say, completely trustworthy. This point, to find that which is absolutely trustworthy, to realize that which is absolutely trustworthy, and then to live according to it, this, as I phrase it, as I teach it, is the purpose of the holy life, the purpose of the sacred path. To actually realize that which is trustworthy to the extent that it can be lived, that it can be embodied, fully realized, completely realized. In fact, even realized beyond the states of life and death, realized beyond living and dying, but completely realized. This isn't just a cultural assumption. This isn't just an idea that we've been taught to believe in. On the contrary, this is something which, once we've realized it, can be directly confirmed as being completely trustworthy, flawlessly trustworthy. And in my experience, and in the experience of many of my, you could say, colleagues, the experience of going in search of a person who has realized this, who embodies it, who lives it, perhaps not in the ways that we expect. It may not look the way we've been taught to expect it to look, but to actually go in search, to truly seek, this is the most powerful means by which we can realize that which is completely true, completely good, completely effective, completely trustworthy. So right now we'll have the opportunity to use a meditation technique in order to explore this question and searching for the answer. Take a moment to straighten up and settle in. For a little while, shift your body around in order to find a comfortable, upright, tall, magnificent posture. And then relax into that posture. Continue to be aware of your body. Once you find a tall, magnificent posture, with each breath, relax into it. Simply relaxing into it. For now, for this part of the practice, keep it very simple. Simply relax. With each breath into your posture. If you become distracted, then gently bring your attention back to your body and relax once again into your posture. You may find that certain parts of your body are more relaxed than others. If so, you have the choice. You can either go into the relaxed parts of your body in order to enjoy that relaxation, or you can bring your attention to the less relaxed parts of your body and then use your breath or whatever else you'd like to infuse those muscles with relaxation. This may not be a quick process. It's okay if it moves slowly. There's no need to rush relaxation. As you use this technique, you're gaining the skill of setting aside the usual anxieties, questions that occupy our minds. For most of us, the primary hindrance to not asking real questions isn't that we don't ask real questions. It's that we occupy ourselves with questions that are not the ultimate purpose of our lives. So in order to set the stage for asking such questions, we begin by simply relaxing. Relaxing into this experience, settling into what is immediately apparent. And if distractions come up, thoughts about anything other than the experience of relaxation in our bodies right now, we set that aside. We practice setting aside our assumptions, our ways of looking at things, that we habitually bring into our experience. So if we're attending to relaxation in our bodies, then that's useful in itself. Continue to deepen that. If we're distracted, then use that as an opportunity to practice setting that aside. See what it's like to be without that. And now we'll explore this journey, embark on this search from this state of awareness in which we're settling into our bodies by relaxing and setting aside whatever distractions may arise. Begin, if you'd like, to ask the question, how shall I live? How shall I live? Ask the question from this settled mind, relaxed body. And feel free to rephrase the question as you'd like. But if you do rephrase it, examine why you rephrased it. What assumptions are voiced in the new phrasing, and whatever answer you get, whatever answer you may find to this question, again, investigate what assumptions are present there. Question those assumptions. Make use of relaxed body, settled mind. To ask this question. Otherwise, it can easily become a source of depression or anxiety. Relaxed body, settled mind. How shall I live? How shall I live? As we do this, we are relaxing our bodies. If distractions come up, we settle our minds. In this way, we set the stage for deeply asking this question. We then ask the question, what shall I do with my life? If we become confused, we're just confused. We're just searching for the answer. If we get an answer, then we question that. Search for the assumptions that are included in that answer, that underlie that answer. We question them. each answer, we question the underlying assumptions. It's not that we claim that there is no answer to this question. But we're seeking the answer without groundless assumptions. It's in discovering how hard it is to be truly honest with ourselves, to be trustworthy to ourselves, that we realize the value of a teacher. So this is a time for conversation. Please feel free to bring up whatever you'd like.
So, the stage I was most interested in is the moment when you described just being in the depth of utter confusion. And if I'm not misquoting you, you said something like, you don't even know how to search for an answer, much less find one. So, I'm not quite sure exactly what to ask, ironically.
It's not ironic.
Appropriately, then? But it seems like there's a certain amount of idea of how to move forward from there.
A certain amount of what?
There's a certain amount of idea of how to move forward from there that could be into words, but the thrust of your talk seemed to indicate that that might not be actually helpful because the confusion is extremely useful to be in.
Yeah, the confusion is extremely useful to be in, but what are you referring to in terms of a way to move forward?
So you really have no idea how to search for answers at all.
Yeah.
Then how do you ever get past that stage?
Right.
If there's nothing you can go off of whatsoever. Or is an implication that there's something that the being confused leads you towards? It's okay.
No, it's good. Did you just answer the question of that being a way to move forward?
I don't know.
Oh, okay, got it. So you said that there still may be an idea of how to move forward, and then you said, and then what I heard you say didn't describe an idea of how to move forward. Correct?
I'm saying, was your point that there is something in the confusion that will eventually at some point guide you forward? Or is the implication that there really is nothing? Because I'm not sure what to take from that.
That there really is nothing?
That could guide you forward if you're that confused.
Well, practically speaking, something will happen. So practically speaking, you'll be deeply confused, and then something will happen. So I don't know if that has to fit into the something will guide you forward paradigm. And that is what I was attempting to point toward, that there's the sense of, well, something guide me forward, is looking at the world in a certain way. Something will or will not guide us forward. I don't know if something will happen fits into either category of something has guided us forward or something has not guided us forward. Something just happens still. Something then occurs. And the confusion itself isn't exactly the point. Although it's very valuable. Confusion is very valuable. Not knowing is very valuable. It's interesting. A lot of the time when people talk about science, people talk about science as having discovered certain important things, and a lot of the time we describe science, that the most important thing that science discovered was ignorance, was not knowing. This is a claim. I'm not saying that I'm proposing this. I've heard scientists and historians of science propose this, that according to them, the European establishment of Catholicism or whatever it was had answered all the questions. It said, here are the answers to the questions. Yes?
Sure.
Where the universe came from and everything. And then a certain group of people discovered how to not know those answers. They discovered ignorance. And that's then the basis of science. So science is an important tradition in that they discovered how to not know. I actually don't agree with this theory for a lot of different reasons. But Historically, I don't agree with it. But it points to something very important, and that is that not knowing matters. Learning how to not know the things that you know is an important skill. So the confusion is important. But it isn't the central point. It's the environment, you might say, but isn't the core. The core is a desperation, a drive, a need to discover the answer. So that's still there. And that's there, ignorance is there, and then stuff happens. The need to know is there, the not knowing is there, and then something happens.
I appreciate that. I don't want to press too far because it seems like that might take away from the usefulness of the confusion. But
yeah, sometimes it's possible that we can learn this path in a way that hinders deep confusion.
Sure.
The thing is that if you're really desperate to find the answer, then you won't get tricked by that. You won't get tricked by the forms of these rather cheap forms of knowing, because you'll see through them. You'll see that they're not relevant. They don't relate to the central question that has to be answered. So it won't hinder you.
so I guess my question would become, is it then safe to try and pick apart that confusion without worrying that you'll lose the usefulness of it?
How would you pick it apart? What do you mean when you say pick it apart?
So the thing that I'm trying to do very carefully here is ask anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because by asking things, that's usually how I try to pick apart confusion. I usually try to
Mm-hmm.
look at any information or anything that's available.
Mm-hmm.
Try to notice it, see if it keeps happening, see what changes about it over time. And then if something remains wildly consistent, then I start to have some ability to, like ice after a freeze.
Mm-hmm.
If I can put my weight on it sufficiently well enough, then I might trust it enough to move forward onto it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would think picking it apart would come from just checking more and more thoroughly all the things I'm looking at against the desperation, seeing if they satisfy it in a superficial way,
Mm-hmm.
or seeing if they satisfy it in a way where it seems to genuinely go away. And if it really can go away at all,
Mm-hmm.
that seems to be incredibly interesting, because the quality of the desperation that's interesting to me is that it's so seemingly unmovable in that moment.
That's right. That's good to do. Absolutely. Very good. Yes.
Soryu,
Mhm.
a couple nights ago or
Yeah.
days ago, you had described how you encountered your teacher and you wound up with a completely empty mind, and your whole burning quest for why are people so mean left you.
Yeah, I didn't have a completely empty mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what that was anyway.
But still, the hatred of humanity lost its footing. Mm-hmm.
When I just want to clarify that I blurted out earlier
Yeah.
that karma is, that it's neutral.
Yeah.
You corrected that it's all negative. Even good karma is negative.
Oh, yes.
Finish that.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm, from the point of view of a practitioner,
Yeah.
the attempt to neutralize karma.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's why I said neutral.
Yeah, great. It's very
So
advanced.
I'm trying not to be involved in good or bad karma.
Mm.
That the whole thing, I'd like it to go away.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an extremely advanced perspective. They talk about good, bad karma, and then that which is beyond either, which I believe is what you're referring to. And it is a very, this is a perspective of an advanced practitioner. And I don't mean to disagree with you. I was just saying that in classical texts, when they talk about karma, they're referring to something bad. There's a clear judgment in it, in the text. I was only representing that view, and the common view. There are certain texts where they try to change that, but in general, the view is that karma is a burden, and that you would have gotten to the point in your own practice when karma could be neutral, when you could, as you say, neutralize karma. This is quite exciting. Oh.
And the way that I'm approaching it is to not go insane, first of all.
Yeah.
Trying to do that, which is kind of try to step out of a room full of hissing snakes. It's not.
Yeah.
So that it can be, the need to act is there. So the only other path that I know or have been described or have practiced at all is devotion.
Yes.
To what is transcendent.
Yeah.
And also immanent.
Yeah.
And that decentralizes the self.
Yeah.
Enough to feel confident that the emptiness will be filled. Filled by what? The golden road of unlimited devotion to all life. And I don't know how to do that in the Buddhist context, actually. And maybe you can help me, will help me, because my overall impression is that which is ultimately trustworthy is being described as absolutely impersonal. And this, I don't know how a person can relate to with a devotional mood. So I'm caught with the Bhagavad Gita as a transpersonal theism that is way beyond Western, any description of God. If you compare Krishna to any monotheistic tradition from the West, vastly different perspective on deity or divinity. So that's just my confession.
Yeah, and in your experience, is it impersonal?
No.
So
Transpersonal.
So then,
No separate person.
Yeah. Then I heard you ask me or talk a little bit about impersonal. What was the significance of that?
That's the equalizer. To, if you're approaching the absolute, you have to pass through that.
The impersonal.
Yes. You have to fulfill the call to let go of the separate self, or the idea that there's a separate cause or an independent doer, that all this work and I'm doing something is a delusion of false motive, and that what actually occurs is that you realize that I have been given life and I love it, so I naturally, in gratitude, respond to the giver, which is a transpersonal deity, is God. In the Western, but you can't leave the divinity with a simple definition or any form of rudimentary definition, because that's just like trying to define guru.
Right.
Both God and guru cannot be defined or controlled. They represent the absolute. And to do that in the world where everything's relative is, it's oxymoron, it doesn't fit. It's considered mad, or it's the only solution. And I'm convinced with you that it is, and it is real, and that consciousness can definitely attain transpersonal ecstasy. Be beside your so-called mortal self and finish the job. What's it good for? What is it doing anyway? It's just disappearing. And some things given your life again if you breathe. So what to do with that? Unconditional devotion to the deity that is inside and above everyone else. We're all parts of that one. And that's a basic, it's just a theosophical orientation, really. A philosophical theology is too small. You can't put it in your mind. It's all immaculate conception at the highest level of experience. And that's the only possible solution, is full experience, as I believe your tradition also is cultivating that as the prime. Find somebody who has a full level of experience, see where yours is in comparison, and absorb that and integrate it into your own. Make sure you don't just imitate, but authenticate it in your own practice, in your own life. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. There's with this, first of all, it's a magnificent depiction of spirituality. So thank you for that. So thank you for that. I might just bring it back to this talk a little bit, only to add to what you said. If you look at, for example, the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. So this Bhagavad, a probable original meaning of that word is the giver, actually. So it means holy or sacred, but probably it originally meant the one who gives. The song about the one who gives, or the song of the giver, the giverness song. And that giver of life is personalized by Krishna, the Guru, in that text, and it's through that relationship that that relationship between Arjuna and Krishna that the entire text unfolds. So it's within this dualistic relationship that a personal expression of the transpersonal teaching is embodied. And the suggestion there, as in many places, is that this kind of relationship in its lived form, in the direct experience of it, transcends each of the categories that we just described. So we described a lot of categories and complicated words, but what we're referring to doesn't fully fit into any of them. The full experience doesn't fully fit into any of these, but within that lived relationship, it is exposed, it is discovered fully. And that certainly is, as you were saying, my experience. So we have these theories, we have these ways of talking about it, and the good news about having a way of talking about it is that can be a little bit of a guide, can point us in a good direction. The bad news is that we typically quietly, subtly pick up the assumptions that we are just imitating or grasping onto. It isn't the complete revelation, and so it's in the relationship that those assumptions are exposed, which is what should happen. So that we're not merely assuming, we don't say it's a beautiful theory and I buy it. That isn't enough. As you say, we have to authenticate it, and generally it's in relationship that authentication process is most effective. Great, thank you.
Just have a few more minutes.
All right, a few more minutes. One more question. Just a second, let me see. Maybe there's someone who hasn't come much, who has something.
Sorry for coming on the show.
No, I love it. It's good that you do. I just want to see, just in case. Maybe. Yes?
I can say something. It's my first time here. So I guess during the meditation, it's very easy to get a response to a question for me.
Mm-hmm.
At least this happens all the time. I meditate, ask myself a question, get an answer, like, okay, that's truth. I'm going to go live it out, and that'll be great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to an extent, right? Sure, it feels nice.
Can you be my teacher?
No, but to what you were saying about the transcendent liberation, it's like when I think about that and kind of touch it with meditation or deeper relaxations, it's like emptiness, blackness, I'm absent from it. It's like a break from living. That's why I like it so much. So then to the question of why am I here? What should I do with my life? Well, yeah, I got an answer. It was unconditional love, right? Do that. And that's the complete opposite of emptiness, which is like blackness, and then unconditional love, how I see it, is light. So they're like night and day. And then I just followed up in the end with the question to myself of like, well, what about those soulmates? What are those all about? Because that's where that unconditional love is what I've experienced. And it's like, well, those are my feelings. That is truly just following these feelings, which is what you talked about earlier. Oh, should we just follow our feelings? And it's like, well, sometimes I just did. Anyway, that was my take on that meditation.
Great. Great.
Yeah. I didn't have a question.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't hear a question. But it's a good report, and I wouldn't say that what you're reporting is common, but it's not uncommon. Each of those 3 points that you bring up. My experience of each of those 3 points is that it's very fulfilling to attempt, as you say, to live them out, and to continue to examine them to find out what underlying groundless assumptions are in each of them that prevent them from being completely fulfilling. Because there are certain, you might say, groundless assumptions in each, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, for example, if there's blackness, that's not emptiness. So, there you are. I mean, it's a significant shift, Blackness can't be emptiness because there's blackness, so that's not emptiness. Love, of course, can be a kind of light, but if it's especially light, then that's not unconditional love. It should be equally black, right?
Yeah.
And then feelings are very interesting to try to follow, because in my experience, they can't be found, much less followed. So all of this is a continuing exploration, and it's the exploration that's most exciting.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.